Do you need help?
They're taking away people's hopes and dreams and their self-fulfillment. I think self-fulfillment matters. I don't care if I'm the...
It's all about selling drugs.
The Everyday PsychVictims podcast.
If you are a child, you better not smile, 'cause they'll take you to the quack, put you on legal crack. So if you are a child, you better not smile, 'cause they'll take you to the quack, put you on Prozac.
Post-SSRI Sexual Dysfunction, or PSSD abbreviated, is permanent sexual dysfunction caused by the class of drugs marketed as antidepressants.
Welcome back. Today I'm joined with P. Due to the sensitive nature of post-SSRI sexual dysfunction, P's identity is remain hidden. How old are you, P?
I'm 21 years old.
And when were you given antidepressants?
It's about 2.5 years now. So in the fall of 2014. So I was 18 at that time.
And when you were 18, were you ever told antidepressants could cause sexual dysfunction or permanent harms?
No, I was not. And I actually went to multiple doctors about it. I went to a psychiatrist and my general physician, and both of them prescribed Lexapro for me, and neither one told me anything about anything that goes on beyond taking medication.
Did your doctors ever report any of the adverse effects his or her drugs gave you?
No, neither one of them. Actually, I never followed up with either one of them about what happened. I think that's because they were mainly physicians that were working with children, and so I was 18 at the time, just moving from having a physician that's treating kids to moving up to my new adult doctor, who is actually someone who I've talked to afterwards. He hasn't reported, but he has been very open and takes refers me to new people. But I haven't. The two people that prescribed me, I never went back and told them that this was after the first 3 weeks. I told one of them, but it wasn't at that point. I didn't really know what was going on. I was so confused, and neither one of them was really informed of the full effects.
Yeah, I understand that. I moved services too around some of those complicated ages with drugs into child and adult services. What about any psychologists? Have you seen any psychologists, and have any of them reported this adverse effect?
Yeah, I've seen a psychologist for about 2 years now. So she saw me first right about at the time when everything was starting until now, and she knows of what I've reported to her, but she and I disagree on the cause of it, and it's kind of the problem that the whole community has, I think, where some people are believing of you and trust you, where others are just kind of dismissive and think it could be from other causes. So she's great when it comes to helping me with underlying anxiety issues, but she's not as supportive. Well, she's supportive, but she's not as believing when it comes to PSSD. Yeah.
Is it fair to say it's sometimes hard to get a psychologist to believe you?
Right. Yeah, and it's hard, one that follows your insurance plan or and once you have a rapport with someone, it's hard to just switch, or it's hard to find someone that believes you, because I think it's quite in the minority of physicians and psychologists who would be open to the idea, especially because they're the ones usually prescribing or in favor of these drugs.
I agree. How long since you stopped taking antidepressants have you been living with post-SSRI sexual dysfunction from antidepressants?
Little over 2.5 years now.
What first happened? How did you know first know that your body was being sexually harmed?
It was that I took them for 4 days 2.5 years ago, and it was that fourth day when I was just wondering. I just had gone to college and I tried masturbating for the first time, and nothing worked, and that really freaked me out. And I thought, I'm throwing this stuff away. Threw it all away. And just thought I'd walk away from it, but obviously that didn't happen. And so I think that when I first realized that something, the first week or so, I thought, this is just stress, this is just normal. But I think maybe in that first month mark or so, my first thought was, wow, this is real, this is powerful, and there is no real answer for this. And that's the first time I've ever felt so out of control in my life.
That sounds really scary. So how scary was that?
Well, I think scared to the degree that it took me from, when I've been having the anxiety issues, it's always a matter of, well, there has to be a way through this. There is medical literature. There is things conventions that will help me get the help I need. And I think it's kind of taking that safety net away of most people won't believe you. Your family might not even believe you. Friends, you feel you can't tell them. And so I think that's what drove me for the first time to feel, almost suicidal, not in the sense that I didn't like or love life, in the sense that I felt so isolated from anyone else that I interacted with every single day who had something that I had taken away from me so unexpectedly and was such a big part of my life beforehand.
Yeah, and conventionally you would think that once you can get rid of the drug and your body would go back to normal.
Yeah, then that's what you'd always be told. Yeah.
How was what happened to your life and friends and stuff?
Right. So, friends, I was in a transition period, so I was going from high school to college anyways. So I think that none of my friends, that's the one group I haven't told. No one that I actually know as a friend and not as a family member I've ever told the story to. And I think that how that affects me is, they still see me as the same kid I was before. And in many ways I am, in a lot of ways of life, but on the outside at least. But on the inside, it fundamentally changed who I was. And so I think that, in some ways it worked in a good way, in the sense that it made me mature really quickly. But it also has been very damaging to friends who, especially girls, who might be interested in me and they don't understand the full background of it. And so I might come across as being cold or running away at the last minute. I think that I've heard a decent amount of people doing that, and something that my old self probably wouldn't have done.
What did your doctor say about permanent damage caused from antidepressants?
So, my doctor I went to my primary doctor, seemed confused about it. He'd never heard about it before. And I mentioned it to him 2 years ago when I first started seeing him. And he seemed, quite dismissive of just kind of, well, give it some more time. You're going through a stressful point in your life, that kind of thing. And then when I saw him again this year, he referred me to a urologist, and the urologist was incredibly unhelpful. It was the first time I've had really an appointment that I think went unwell, and in the sense that I talked to the urologist, and they had all of these theories for what it could be, and they just kept on going down the list of it's not a physical blockage issue, it's not a anxiety issue, because all of my mental health problems are actually currently being very well treated, and not due to medication at all, just lifestyle changes and just, I think, maturing as well. And so they kind of went on that list. It's not that. We don't think it's hormonal. We've done this kind of stuff. It's not testosterone. And they kind of got to the bottom of the list, and instead of listening to my concerns, they just thought, well, we can't describe it. That's not our area of expertise. We can give you, a medication to try and help the problem, but it's not. It's like a Viagra or something like that. And that was very disappointing, in the sense that they just kind of threw their hands up and said, we don't understand what's going on here, and all of your concerns are irrational, basically. And so it's something that we don't understand, but we're not going to take your theory into account, even though it describes all the symptoms perfectly. So that was very disappointing.
Yeah, that's the same thing that happened to me. I went for the test, the hormone test, the blood vessel test, repeated injections of Viagra down below, and you were just 18 at the time?
Well, this was very recently. I hadn't gone. This was probably about 3 months ago, so I was 20 at the time.
Well, it's something to look forward to. But were you looking forward to seeing what those tests said at the time, and the hope that there might be something found? Yeah.
I mean, you always kind of hold out a little bit of hope for the medical community, especially people that are supposed to be experts in their field. And you think, well, no one, you're online and no one really knows exactly what's going on. No one has an advanced degree. So you think, well, there's people here who are quote unquote experts. And you go to them and you think, oh, they'll have some answer at least. And to find out that the experts in that sort of field had absolutely no idea what was going on was very scary. And I think that it was very telling of how, not obscure, but how underneath the surface of psychiatry and urology this was, and how rare it is too. And I think that that really became apparent when I went and talked to the doctors. And it's when I realized that there was nothing that conventional medicine, at least from that perspective, that clinic could do for me. It was pretty eye-opening, and it took away a lot of hope, and it took a while for me to get back on my feet and think, well, I don't need a doctor to tell me what I already know and to keep doing the work that they've already been doing. I can keep doing that without having this one specialist for my area agree with me.
Yeah, I saw a top neurourologist in London, and he was the only person that was aware of this condition, PSSD, and acknowledged it as reality. But everybody else that I saw, he was quite a top specialist. So it's good that he acknowledged it. But that's one in a quadrillion million.
Right.
Like, I was obviously very lucky, if you can call it that, to find him eventually.
Yeah, right. Right, and I think it's important that those people, I think there's probably still stigma within the profession if you come out and say, I believe this or I believe that. I think that maybe, that stigma needs to be broken, or people need to start talking, because I think that it's such a, just because it has to do with sexuality, it's just such a stigma. It's kind of, people don't want to talk about it. And even in the field, I think, of urology, or neurourology, I think it'd be almost dangerous to confront the pharmaceutical industries and this kind of common convention that these drugs are safe, because I think it's so comfortable for people to think that they are safe and that they are strictly helpful.
Yeah, I have doctors that acknowledge it now, but they won't put it in writing, of course. Yeah. Their jobs are under too much threat, I guess. But they also, at the same time, are not willing to inform people in the future, which I also find a little questionable, that some doctors who accept it acknowledge it. And fair enough, they won't risk their own jobs by putting it on paper, but at the same time, they are not willing to inform future people. What do you feel about the right of people to be informed about it? And should that be overridden by the doctor?
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree. It's hard, I think, to break that. What happens behind closed doors is one thing, and then to come out to the community and say, you're to a conference or similar, and say this is a totally other thing for them, because they think that their reputation, I think, is in the line, which is unfortunate.
Are you doing neuroscience? Is that something?
Yes.
What would you say? Would you say that if we could dispel some PSSD myths potentially, what would you say about the people who say it's depression causing it?
Right. So I think that that claim is based in some of the symptoms. So I think that it has been shown many times that people who are depressed or anxious may have problems with having a high sex drive or being interested in having sex. But I don't think that I've seen any sort of study anywhere that shows that translates into the kind of broad physical numbing that a lot of these people see, especially in the severe cases. And I think that lack of evidence is probably the most shocking. It's not really, I don't have a chemical answer for it, and why, especially why depression could cause this physical numbing of a body. And I think that that's a symptom that's very prevalent among people who actually have PSSD, as opposed to people who are going through a really tough time and might not actually have it, but just are in need of some sort of antidepressant treatment. And I think that I'm probably a little bit in the minority, especially in the community, where I believe that not all cases are truly based on the antidepressant medication. And in that I think that most cases that come onto forums and such are, but I think that there are some people who genuinely need help, And I don't think that comes through, for me, or for most people, I don't think that comes through an SSRI medication. But I think that there are ways that people can dispel that worry if they're worried that might be them. And I think that is just look for other ways to treat yourself. And it doesn't have to be through medication. I think that a lot of people can find a lot of help with counseling, staying active, eating well, and a lot of those things are kind of shot down with people who are proponents of medication, who say that there's this chemical imbalance in the brain, and especially with serotonin signaling. And I think that is quite an outdated model in the sense that it's been shown that there are other antidepressants that don't have this serotonin signaling mechanism, and that there are a lot of changes that occur in the brain when someone is depressed, but it's not just involved with serotonin. And so a drug that strictly just increases serotonin count throughout the brain might not be the most effective thing for treating depression. And I think a lot of studies show that SSRI antidepressants are barely even better than placebo in tests. And so giving them broadly to everybody and expecting a drug that is so potent and so specific and so targeted, and then expecting that there's no one across the whole globe that is permanently affected by that drug, where if it's an antibiotic and someone, there's some antibiotics or antiviral medications that 1 out of 1,000 people has a severe life-threatening reaction to, and that's okay to talk about because it doesn't have the same stigma as sexuality, and especially because sexuality is kind of pegged as something as not necessary. We'll say you have to treat your depression first. That's more important. And I don't think that that's true, because I think that you should be treating the disease, if you're treating it correctly, without giving up something. If you're giving up something so fundamental in order to have this treatment, which a lot of people report the same side effects that we do on the medication, but it's just coming off of it that is what is more rare, and is more of a problem for us, because we no longer have a choice of if we want to come off of that medication state or not. We're stuck in that state. And so I think that coming at it through that perspective and thinking about people who disagree with it fundamentally, PSSD, I think is incorrect, because they have given the credit to the drug for causing these problems when you're on the drug. But then when you come off the drug, this very potent drug, they completely said it's impossible. And so I think that if you have to look at the symptoms, and the symptoms that we have, a lot of them are physical, and the physical symptoms I think mean a lot more than symptoms of I'm just not feeling as into sexuality as I used to. I think the physical symptoms of changes to, I think people have reported blood flow, their hands or their feet are colder, things like, ringing in the ears, things like the genital numbness. I think that's a lot harder to fake and a lot harder to dispel just by saying the person's depressed.
Yeah, they use it. It's used, and doctors do prescribe it for premature ejaculation because it makes genitals go numb in humans and animals, right? I mean, these effects are reported in happens to animals too. That are, you could say, rats are unbiased. Would that be sound correct assumption? Yeah,
and I think that's one of the things that I've been saying a lot is that the animal tests will show you that there is no bias really when you have a rat. The rat sits down, and these are rats that are not depression model rats. These are just run-of-the-mill rats that they're buying for these tests. And when you even treat the mother with an SSRI antidepressant before it has its offspring, the offspring are less sexual. And when you treat rats who are in development, I think that's the other thing, is development is such an important role in this PSSD model, because I think a lot of people are coming in, like you and I, around the age of 18. And so I think that when you look at these rat studies that show that these rats that are treated during this critical time of development, or before that when they have their mothers being treated, and showing that causes these same kind of symptoms, I think it's very telling, because these animals don't have bias. They're not faking these symptoms. They're not depressed. And so seeing that from the animal model is, I think, another very telling piece of evidence that this isn't just something that is in our heads. in the sense that we're making our own problems with it. I think that it's very chemical, it's very hormonal, and there's a fundamental change that happens in the brain, especially in some animals. And in some people, it never happens. I think that probably in the same way, some animals, it never happens. But if you look at the trend of a lot of animals or treating animals at a certain point in development, you can see that there is a change. And it's hard for me to see so many people just disregard that change. And I post it again and again and again. And some people continue to just disregard what I've been saying, which is quite disappointing.
Did you have any withdrawal that happened?
I mean, I'd say like
or noticed?
I was on it so shortly that I think that I did in a sense that, right away I couldn't sleep, at all, and so it wasn't just because I was having problems with sleeping because I was anxious. It was because I was having problems sleeping because I physically could not sleep. And
yeah,
what was that?
Yeah, is that during when you decided to stop taking it, then you were stimulated and couldn't sleep as well? Are you saying that
Right,
that was part of? Yeah, no, that's right. Remember some of my emotions, and actually it's part of I had PGAD, which is persistent genital arousal disorder, on withdrawal, which is a sexual effect of the drug on withdrawal that has been documented in the past with a nun. It's been documented in a psychopharmacology book that I've got, that a nun experienced that, and they obviously believed her to some extent because she was a nun. So she was unlikely to be making that up or lying about that kind of thing, about having sexual orgasms, which can be a rebound effect of withdrawal that some people have experienced when they stop taking the drug. I can relate to you that when my genitals went numb, it was extremely scary, and when I came off of it, the only thing I could do at some points, there's no way you're going to keep taking, and I had no guidance on tapering or anything. The only thing, so at some point you have to say, I've got to stop taking this thing that is causing me such a scary harm that you wouldn't seem possible because it feels so unnatural. And it's a very scary and alone thing, and people shouldn't be, a young person going through that is so scary and alone. And basically PSSD, for me, that has just continued, and no one should live in fear and isolation and sexual violation their whole life. I mean, David Healy says that, I think, who's done quite a bit of work on PSSD, that something about that close to 100% of people receive numbing effects when they initially start the drug, which I did as well, so I know what he's talking about. It was harder to reach ejaculation and orgasm when I was first put on the drug, and I was a child, so obviously I didn't tell anyone because I was a child, and that was taboo for teenagers. Don't tell other people that kind of stuff usually.
Right.
But when I was switched to another SSRI that happened on. So I personally believe it's very wrong to do that to children. But I see mental health is the whole idea of mental health, I guess, is that they're evaluating your mental health, but the system that they use is drugs. But when it comes to the drug harms or effects it has, then it just comes back to analyzing your health and an ignorance of analyzing a drug a lot of time. I was told by generally for the last 7 years until recently, last 6 years or so, and until very recently, apart from the top urologist, that there could be no permanent damages from psychoactive drugs in general after 3 months. They're generally harmless. They completely left your system, so there could be no permanent harms, despite the fact that obviously you experience these changes in your body when you initiate the drug, and after being on them every single day. People are on this stuff for a long time, and they don't get monitored and taken off of them usually. It's seen as it's your medication as much as your finger is your finger. And any problems that happen, they have a mental health problem, or, there's something not right with their mental health, any consequence. That's an experience that I and a lot of people find themselves in. And I wanted to ask you that, considering the English Wikipedia that had 58 medical references at the time was removed, and studies like in a Spanish study with 1,022 people that show 59% incurred sexual dysfunction from antidepressants, I mean, do you think there is some foul play, and do you think potential sufferers are aware of post-SSRI sexual dysfunction that were caused by their, quote unquote, medication?
Yeah. I think that there could be some sort of foul play. I think that a lot of it, from my perspective, is ignorance. And ignorance in the sense that there's kind of this crossover that we have between the people that are in neuroscience or in, I think psychiatry or neurology, and those kind of people, I think would be generally more apt to be open to the idea. Where I think you have people that are in urology who, are, from my experience, and I don't know about your experience, or I may be generalizing, but they're are much less open to the idea, and I think that's because they generally don't think of urology in terms of neurology or psychiatry. They think of urology in terms of physical changes to that part of the body. And I think that, so when someone comes in and tells them something from the brain is causing this, I think that there's kind of this response of, no, we don't tell us what is going wrong here. We know this region better than anyone else. And that's kind of like the, and so I think that when you have then studies that are done by someone who's kind of been brought up in that whole kind of culture of this isn't possible, there has to be a physical cause of this, not from the brain, I think that they are going to be very dismissive of the fact that it's possible. And I think that then that goes back to, that same kind of thought goes back to when these people who are doctors and becoming PhD students, I think that they're reading textbooks that are probably written at this point from the 1990s, 1980s, early 2000s. And I think that when the drugs first came out, they had this kind of thought of that they were the miracle drug. They were the cure to everything. And obviously, part of it I think is because there was an enormous potential for money in these drugs, and that if it would have came out in the first 5 years that this was possible, I think that those drug companies would have lost an enormous amount of money. So there's probably some push by them to push these kind of things down and think that was easier in the late 80s, early 90s because of the lack of the internet. And the internet has brought power to the people in the sense that it allows them to come together and find other people and form a community and then kind of rise up and say, this is wrong, I don't believe this. But in that 20 or so years when we didn't have that resource, I think that there was a lot of textbooks and a lot of doctors being trained in thinking that this wasn't possible, that these drugs were flawless. And so I think that there may have been some definite financial incentive in the early days, especially with these medications. In that route, maybe consider a little bit of foul play of finding studies that show that their drug is a little better when maybe they're trying to alter results a little bit. But I think that a lot of the financial benefits, especially for the drugs that are produced now that we think of as SSRIs that have gone generic, I think that there's less financial incentive for them. But I do think that a lot of the problem now is kind of this ingrained systematic belief that that's impossible, these drugs are causing any damage. I think that was maybe caused 15, 20 years ago by drug companies trying to promote them as completely safe. And so I think that the foul play is kind of embedded now, and maybe it's not intentional anymore. Maybe it's kind of a residual effect of those drug companies trying to push the medications in the past. I think that going forward, I think the way to treat it is treating it as an intellectual lack in our knowledge. And I think that the study from the Wikipedia and the Spanish study you talk about, I think that they may have been taken down by people who are experts in the field, or doctors who are established in their careers, who have a lot of weight, or drug companies who then say, hold on, wait a minute, this and this doctor all say this is impossible, and they're leading in their field. How is this possible? And so I think that maybe it's a little bit less intentional, but I think that kind of that precedent that's been set makes it easy to do this. And I think that that's added to the fact that, again, it's coming back to the whole, this is very, very taboo, kind of not easy to talk about, stigmatized, and it's easy then to say these people are crazy, they are mentally ill, and there's that mental illness stigma coming back in, and then saying we have doctors to say that this probably doesn't happen, and those doctors were raised in the system that says it doesn't happen, and therefore the study is discredited and the Wikipedia page comes down.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, a lot of the doctors on the ground level or whatever, they're highly, they spent a lot of years training in certain textbooks from certain, but they say a lot of them are do come across as nice and trying to help people. Mm-hmm. So so it's although I feel what they're doing is neglectful and wrong, I do it did and does come across that a lot of them are genuinely trying to genuinely trying to help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think as someone who's interested in the medical field or the research field myself, I kind of get a different view of that side of things that I wouldn't see if I wasn't part of that field. And I think that that's what I try to bring to the community, in the sense that I don't think it should be a battle, because I think as soon as you make it a battle, it's those crazy people on the forum versus us prestigious doctors, and then for the reverse, it is those crazy pretentious doctors who are closed-minded, and then us victims. And so I think that the real way to move forward is, I know there's a lot of anger, I know there's a lot of hurt, I know there's a lot of things in our past, but I think that not treating doctors as the enemy, treating them, if they don't listen to you, fine. 10, 15 years from now, a lot of those people will be at the end of their careers or retiring, and while that might not be immediately satisfying, I think that there is kind of this resurgence in the last 10 or 15 years of the new generation of doctors and the new generation of researchers who are starting to embrace this theory. And so I think that if we treat the new, young, up-and-coming doctors, if you see a doctor, treat them with respect, don't yell at them, don't curse them out, I think that we can help build a rapport with the community that's very good, and also reaching out to them, letting them know that this is the problem. And the ones that are responsive, I think, are going to be the ones that are younger in their careers and have more of an open mind, and have maybe read a little bit of this literature in the past, and then letting them grow up in their careers and talk to their colleagues about it. And so I think that it's hard, because I see a lot of people come in and say, my doctor did this, my doctor did that, they're not listening, I hate my doctor. And you have to see that the doctor, at the end of the day, is trying to treat the patient. And if the patient comes across as unstable mentally, it's quite easy to discredit them. So I think the best thing you can do is remain calm, come in with facts. Doctors and researchers love facts. Show them the studies, remain calm. If they believe you, great. If they don't, hope that there's enough people coming in after you that eventually they see the trend and switch over to your way of thinking. Because I think that getting angry at them, or treating them with disrespect or treating them as the enemy, is long-term not what we want, because they're the ones that we need writing the papers, talking to colleagues, and looking for solutions.
That makes a lot of sense. The conversation needs to happen. I'd like to so there's something that happened. I'm getting banned quite a lot from having the conversation on certain so-called mental health charities. Obviously, a lot of these things are funded by pharma, but nobody really knows that, or largely funded by pharma interests, like a lot of the leading doctors that, like you mentioned. But the mighty on the mental health have banned me. I can't talk about this. The PSSD mental health. I can't talk about mental health PSS when it comes to PSSD. I'm banned. I can't write on like mighty in the mental health and some other. They censor a lot of the other charities where you're supposed to be able to talk about your mental health. So what would you like to say to some of the nice people that are working, or well-intentioned people that are working in those mental health charities, that that when they come across people that are suffering with things that affect what they say is their mental health, like PSSD or other permanent harms?
Yeah, I would just like to say that I think that everyone should keep an open mind, and I think that so frequently in our world, in our society, people close down and they make assumptions, and I think that's so dangerous, especially because they're working from a perspective of mental health that was until so recently very stigmatized, very misunderstood, and treated pretty awfully. And so I think that all they asked for maybe 10, 15 years ago was an open mind on depression, anxiety, things that are very, very prevalent, but no one ever wanted to talk about. And it's good that you've had these advances in the ability to talk about depression or anxiety. But I think that at the same time, it's easy then to sit back and say, okay, now we have our views established. Everything outside of that is ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. And I think that you have to keep your mind open, keep the conversation going, and say, here's what I'm bringing to the table. I think that it's very, very, very easy to discredit just sweepingly all these claims with the whole mental health debate. And I think that I'd like to tell them that just keep an open mind. Even if you don't believe the studies, at least give them the light of day. At least give these people the ability to post, and even if it's not stuff situationally or things about their. I know it would be nice to be able to talk about your experience, but I think that if they would at least just listen to the more medical or the more scientific debates at first, and then use that as a little bit of trust to move forward into the more, this is my story, this is what happened to me, this is what I think is happening systematically in the whole pharmaceutical or mental health field. And because I know, like you said, I know that these pharmaceutical companies are very, very closely tied to the doctors doing these studies. A lot of times, they're the ones giving the doctors the medication to do these studies. They're the ones helping them get grants to do these studies. And so there's a very, very close tie between the pharma field and the medical and research field. And a lot of that has to do because so many people coming out of medical school and graduate school are going into industry. So these are people, this is their classmates from school. And so it's what, if you call up your classmate and say, hey, I see you're doing research on this, can we donate some medication for you? And then can we talk about it on this site you're on? This is a community. And so we're outsiders of the community trying to break into the community and change the whole way they do things. And so I think that just taking patients and trying to give them what they know best, which is facts.
Thank you. How's your friends and family taken the news, and how do you see, how is this, you're remarkably resilient. I applaud you. I really applaud you for that. You should really give yourself credit for the way you are moving forward. And this is not something that a lot of people around your age have to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Do you think that there could be a lot more people out there that don't know that what has happened to their body is known as, from that antidepressant, referred to as PSSD? I could have been convinced at many points that, for example, people tried to convince me that I had ME, and these include doctors, and I almost fell for, some belief that I could have had some other, medical thing that explains it. We're trying to get the word of PSSD out there a bit more. Do you think there is a lot more room to inform people than is right now? Do you think there's more room for that?
Yeah, definitely. And that's a lot of what I've been trying to work on, bridging the gap, first of all, between the scientific and medical community and our community, and also coming at it with trying, taking out the stigma. And I think that the forums have been quite good about that, in the sense that you can talk freely. There's no TMI. There's no too much information. There's people who are open to express themselves freely, in a way that you couldn't on the forums that you previously mentioned. That have been probably more, historically what you'd expect someone to go to if they had these problems. I think that one of the problems is people who don't come across things that I posted or you have posted or similar people like us have posted. If they don't come across those things and they just go straight to their doctor, it's very, very easy to be, it's a convincing argument. And I think that there's probably a lot of people who are convinced off of like our way of thinking. And then there's probably another group of people who are older, don't know how to use the internet in parts of the world where the internet access isn't quite as easy to get. There's probably people who don't think of going on the internet or don't connect the dots. For me, I connected the dots because it was so quick, but maybe someone who's been, it's been 2 or 3, 4 years on this, and then it happens. Maybe they don't connect those dots. Maybe they think this is something wrong with me, and then maybe they seek help. Maybe they don't. And so I think that there's probably a large percentage of people who don't want to or aren't able to or don't know of these things, these resources. And so I can see how there's probably a lot of people who don't matriculate to these forums. And part of what I've tried to do is make a very, very accessible platform. That's kind of my newest project, is working on this site to try to leave these resources open for people at all times. And I think that when you go to a forum, it's very overwhelming. There's so many people posting. A lot of people watch and don't join. And I get a lot of emails, people telling me I want to join, but I'm too scared, or for a while it was locked, and or people are just, they want to talk but they don't want to join, and they're too scared to join the conversation themselves. And that's why I'm very thankful for your campaign and what you've done as well, because you've been very open. You've been it's very brave to come out and say, not just as a persona on the internet, but as a persona, you come out in real life with videos and showing your face. I think that's very important, to show people that you can get through this. There are ways to cope with this, and there's a community that's looking out for you and people looking out for you, and you're not alone. It puts kind of a personal touch on people behind a keyboard.
Yeah, it was very scary to write sexual dysfunction into a computer, especially if it was a shared computer, or that usually people are not the only ever person that use a computer or something. Mm-hmm. Just typing in the words sexual dysfunction into a computer is something that I never wanted to do, but it might be a bit more comfortable at 80 years old than 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you for your time. I think we should wrap this up. Maybe could do something in the future, if you're willing, if that sounds good.
I'd be very happy to continue this in the future.
Thank you for everything you've done, and for yourself too. Would you like to play a game of side effect roulette?
Yeah. How does that work?
So usually you would have a dice. This is a new game. This is something new because I thought the subjects are so dark, we might as well. It really needs to add something enlightening to it. Would do it good. There you go.
I agree.
So I'm going to pretend I'm rolling the dice. What number from 1 to 6 would you like?
I'll take a 4, please.
Okay. You got... I'm sorry, we're going to have to keep you hanging. This game is not complete yet.
Okay. I'll have to come back.
Yeah. That's my trick. Thank you very much, P, for doing this. And thank you very much for doing this and being so brave.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome.